Hi everybody, welcome back to Tales from the Road. My name is Marcos Casiano and I'm here to tell you about some of my adventures across the highways and byways of the US and Canada, but never Mexico. Anyways, this next tale has to do with time a record company contacted me. Because back in the 80s, I think this is like between 1982 and 85, it seems like. And I wish, I guess back in those days, we didn't document things as well as we do now with cell phone pictures and cell phones and everything. But anyways, back around this time, I had a band called NightWings, which I led with a guitar player named Brion Bell. And he and I were the leaders of this band. And so the thing with Brian and I, coming from Nashville, we always thought in terms of we need to get a record deal. Now, at this time, I was living in Huntsville, Alabama, and the other guys in the bands, which were great guys and great players, they were always like thinking of, we got to get the latest gig. They wanted to find a good, secure gig because Huntsville at the time was full of house gigs, and that was fine and dandy. But again, Brian and I, coming from Nashville, we thought in terms of, getting a record deal. Huntsville mentality was, let's get a good gig at a club. So anyways, we recorded some tracks, and I'm leaving a lot of details out. And we recorded a few songs, and we actually had them pressed up on a 45. It shows you how back this goes, because, you either did songs on a cassette, put them on a cassette, or a 45. But on this particular song, and I believe on the first single that we did, it was called Little One. So we pressed it up on a 45. And I started sending them out, and I got the idea to send a copy of the 45 to Monument Records in L.A. because I didn't know that they had an office out there, and also they had an office, of course, in Nashville, and I believe I sent the 45 to Nashville too. Well, one day, you send them out and you never think about them again. You just kind of wait. The office in Nashville called me, and the guy says, "My name is Tex, and Bob Fed." When he said Bob Fed, I recognized the name because I had sent our 45 to I don't know if he was A&R or if he was actually the president of Monument Records. He said Bob Fed wanted me to contact you, and I was wondering if you can come up here and meet with me. I'd like to meet you and talk to you. So it's like. Like, how soon could I get there? Yeah, a record company contacts you. Now, at the time, Monument Records was not a big record company. I mean, I forgot to do all the research for this, but I remember that Tony Joe White was signed to the label. And if I'm not mistaken, Dolly Parton had a publishing deal with Monument Records, and they had a few other artists. I'm not sure who they were. I don't remember who they were. So I get to the record company, and, I think I was supposed to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning. I walk in. And when I walk into Tex's office, I couldn't believe how many 45s were lined up on the floor. I mean, they were like four deep and at least knee high. Probably knee high for me would be like 3 feet. And my jaw just dropped, and I thought, wow, I've never seen so many 45s. While we were there in the office, the UPS truck comes, and the guy's carting in more 45s. And I'm thinking, man, if Nashville gets that many 45, I can imagine what the LA office is getting. Plus the fact that the guy, how did he find our 45? He pulls it out, he listens to it, and he has Tex calls us. So the thing that I remember that Tex asked, and this became kind of a common thread when I would talk to other people, and they always ask, "Are you willing to tour?" I go, "Yeah, how fast do you want me to get on the bus and we'll get out there and start playing?" That was the whole thing. We wanted to play and have a record label behind us. And so at the end of our meeting, Tex goes, "Well, Marcos, I tell you what," he says, "right now we're making some changes here at Monument Records, but I'll be back in touch with you." So that was kind of basically the end of it. I walked out of the office, and I was pretty happy, and I never knew if he was gonna call me back or not. So around this time, the band it started falling apart. So I didn't really, follow up much because I was kind of like, the bass player quit, the keyboard player quit. I can't remember why they quit, and it was like, I just felt like, I can't promote the band the way it is right now because we had another bass player who wasn't that great. And, at the time, we didn't really have a keyboard player. Actually hired a trumpet player who could play keyboards, And so, just one thing would lead to another, and I just kind of forgot about it. And I think part of the problem is I never was that great of a businessman, and Brian and I really weren't really, business people. We never could find, like a manager, and so as it started falling apart, I remember Brian went to Muscle Shoals to play with the band. I stayed in Huntsville for a while. Then I eventually joined Brian and the bass player who was in NightWings at this club in Muscle Shoals. We played there for about 3 months, and while we were there, I wanted to do some more recording. So I said, Brian, let's start working on some more tunes and let's record some more stuff and get it out there. So I went to Brian's house. We actually just kind of did one little rehearsal at his house, and that was kind of the end of it. And that we have an old saying, the handwriting's on the wall. I think the gig was coming to an end. I ended up getting another gig in Huntsville, and Brian stayed in Muscle Shoals for what was probably maybe just a couple more weeks, because like I said, you could tell the thing was coming to an end. So I was, kind of like wondering what to do, and then I was out one afternoon, and when I get home, there's a message, and Brian had called me, and he wanted a ride to the bus station, and he said he was in his message that he was moving back to Miami, Florida, and so that was kind of like the last I ever saw Brian, and I did end up cutting some more tracks later on by myself with some other people, but I think when Brian left, it took like the wind out of my sails because Brian was kind of my right hand man. I depended on him because he was a great singer, great guitar player, and in the band NightWings, everybody was a good singer except for me. But Brian had the most commercial voice, and that's why when we started recording, I had Brian. He played on our first couple of tracks, even though the other guys were really good singers, but Brian, he had the most commercial voice, and again, for a record company to call you, it had to be, it had to have been pretty good. So I was, like I said, the whole thing was a learning experience, and to do it over again, I think I would have been a little more aggressive and continued calling record companies even without the other guys in the band, because I figure if a record company wanted us to come up and audition, the guys that quit, I probably would have called them now in hindsight and called them and say, hey, such and such record label wants us to audition for them. Let's go up there and play, So anyways, that's basically how things went with this group NightWings and Monument Records and Tex. And, later on in life, I learned that having a record deal isn't everything in life, because I tell people all the time. I said, the worst thing that ever happened to Michael Jackson was that he got a record deal and became famous, and the worst thing that ever happened to Elvis was he got a record deal and became famous. So you have to be careful with dealing in the music business. If you're not spiritually rooted and grounded, I think the business will kill you. So right now, 40 some years later, I'm happy, and I'm still playing, and I still love playing. Even though the band doesn't have a record deal, but I get out there, I do my job, and I'm still enjoying it. So that was a story again of Monument Records, NightWings, and the record deal that never came through. Okay, more later.